Hey gang, Will Johnson from the Ashland Fly Shop here, and a beautiful morning on the Rogue River, and we're going to look at some nymph fishing techniques here today. And this is a type of fishing that we do a lot of in the Pacific Northwest for summer run steelhead, winter steelhead. Got a lot of bedrock rivers in the Pacific Northwest that have a lot of these kind of deep slots and pockets and pools and things like that in them, where dragging a nymph through can be extremely effective for summer steelhead. So today we're going to be using a 9.5 foot 7 weight, which is really my choice for this type of fishing. Nice fast action. You can be anywhere from a 9 to a 10 foot rod. Any rod of that length is going to work really well for you. I typically like the 9.5 to 10 footers. It gives you a little more reach on the rod, a little more reach, little easier mending, for that setup. Today I'm using a 9 weight steelhead Atlantic salmon line, and I really like to overline these rods, sometimes fairly aggressively. Sometimes I'll even go up to a 10 weight, with a 9.5 foot 7 weight rod, because what we're trying to do there is we're trying to get a little more mass in that fly line, to turn over these bugs, these larger flies that we're fishing. So today, for an example, I'm just using a single fly, but I've got a fairly heavily weighted size 6 stonefly, 7.5 foot leader, and a thingamabobber here, indicator just about a foot down from the fly line. And I really like that, that line, that little heavier line's really going to pitch this stuff out there, coupled with a fast action rod, a little more flex in the rod, loads it up well, and it really is going to push those flies out there for you, which is kind of part of the deal there when you're fishing this stuff, is how to get these flies to your target, and then after that, how to mend effectively from there. So the Steelhead Atlantic salmon line has really been a favorite of mine because it's got a nice long taper on it, about a 60-foot head. So you can really mend at long distances when you're trying to get that nice long drag-free drift. So we're going to look at two different examples of how I like to get these flies out there, two different casts, so to speak, if you want to call it casting, with this type of setup, because it's definitely pretty tough. The first one, which we see a lot of folks do and when they get started, is just basically a water-loaded cast, where you're bringing the flies down through the run till they're at the end, stripping in a little bit of line, and then just kind of pitching them back upstream like that, where you can make a nice mend to control that drift, trying to get your fly line above that indicator to make a nice drag-free drift. Then after that, we're going to look at more single-hand spay casting techniques, which really, I feel like, if you're really pushing that nymph game, that's where you're going to want to go. You're really going to want to go into single-hand spay casting. It's really going to give you an edge as far as your back cast, as far as really being able to present those nymphs and really put them out there at good distance and control them well. Also, to make a nice quick change of direction cast, it works extremely well. So we're going to kind of get started looking at that. So here we go. So the first cast I want to show you here is really just, as I mentioned, this kind of pitch or kind of a lob cast. And this is a water-loaded cast, which I think is a really critical thing to say about this cast. You really want that tension on the line to be able to get that fly moving and get it up there. And it looks something like this. It's really a nice way to kind of get started with this type of fishing. It's kind of an easy cast, and it really gets you out of that overhead casting. Overhead casting these types of setups, these types of rigs, is really problematic. You're going to find a lot of tangles coming up, but if you're able to kind of do this pitch cast, it's really going to be helpful for you to really keep those flies in a straight line and keep that line moving. So we want to strip in a little bit at this point. Sometimes it'll take a couple shots to get it where you want it. And if you've got the backcast room, you really want the tension on that fly, on that rig. And I'm just going to kind of demonstrate here the way you can sort of go back and forth here. You can see I'm bringing in a little bit of line here so that I can have that tension. So it's still a cast per se, but I've got the tension on the rod here, and I'm really able to get these flies up where I want them with this type of cast. So I can really get them up there, and then after I get it up there, I can make that nice upstream mend, and I really can follow that fly and get a really nice drift there. So as I go through that run, you know, once I've finished that run, I can kind of strip in. And you do want to strip in your flies. You always kind of want to start with, I'd say, 20, 25 feet of line out. If you have less than that, it gets kind of problematic for getting that line moving. So we're going to start with about that much line out, maybe a little less, 15 feet or so. We're going to work that line out like this, just kind of letting it go through our fingers, just like we kind of would with an overhead cast. But you know, you can see this is a little problematic. So if we are just pitching it from the water, using that water load to get those flies moving, we really get a nice high arcing loop out there that really keeps those flies from tangling up and wrapping around the leader. And from there we can do our mending. We're going to look at that here real quick. Here we're pitching the flies out. And then from there, once I get the flies to my target, I can make that nice upstream mend and reach mend, and I'm really in the zone there, really in the zone with that fly. So this is a really nice way to get started, you know, with nymph fishing with bigger flies and you know, bigger rods for steelhead. So the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at some single-hand spay techniques, which really I feel like if you're really kind of pursuing nymph fishing, you know, in a really serious way, really are going to have a hard time avoiding your single-hand spay casting techniques. They work extremely well. You've got requires a lot less room for back cast, and not only that, but it's a great change of direction cast, and it's basically based on the double spay. And the reason that I like to use that is it really keeps the fly and the anchor of that cast on one side of your body. When I'm nymph fishing with single-hand spay techniques, different than two-hand casting, I really try to keep those flies on one side of my body. I don't really want those flies to cross my body. So if I'm using those techniques, and what I mean by crossing my body would be more like a circle spay, which we see in spay casting techniques quite a bit. Really want to try to avoid doing that. We want to try and keep all of that on one side of our body there. Not only that, but we're really trying to cast upstream more. So the double spay with single hand techniques looks a lot like that. It's a really quick change of direction cast, really gets those flies out there, and then I can make that nice mend, and I'm kind of right back into my slot that I'm fishing there as I sort of, you know, move through the run there. I don't necessarily have to do that back and forth that I might have to do with that lob cast or that water loaded cast. I could bring in, once again, you really want about 25, it's even more important with this, you want about 25 or 30 feet of line out. And this is where it really helps to have that overlined rod. You know, it's almost just critical to have that rod overlined with this type of cast. Almost the way you would with a Skagit head if you guys are familiar with single hand techniques. So you can see real quick change of direction, really get those flies back out and right back out there in the zone. And I'm fishing down there like that, just getting through the run really quickly. I'm going to demonstrate this just a couple more times. You can do this on either side of the river. You see my flies are staying on my downstream side. They're swinging around this way when I'm nymphing. I'm bringing them in. My cast setup is on this side of my body, and everything's staying over here. And in that way, I can cast upstream as well, because that's where you want to be with nymphing techniques. You want to cast upstream into the head of that run and get that nice presentation going down through the run. Fly's got a little above me there, but that's all right. And make that nice mend. And your roll cast, your stack mend, you're seeing me do that stack mend after the cast. And I really think of that as kind of about a half power, or what I call kind of a half-hearted roll cast to get that line up above your indicator. I'll demonstrate that again here. So again, we've got that about 20 to 30 feet of line out, really getting those flies up there, making that second roll cast. For all you trout guys, you got to be careful not to make those mends down in here. This type of mend and this type of setup really requires a nice long stroke like that. Coming back for my mend, nice long mend. I'm all set up. I'm sweeping down into my target there, drifting down into my target area there. So you want to be casting, you know, up above into the pool. And that's a single hand spay casting techniques with an indicator, something I find extremely effective for our Northwest rivers. Thanks a lot for checking it out today. Give us a call if you have any questions.